Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire.
Happy Monday and welcome back, Heat Seekers, to the IDP HeatSeekers Fantasy Live Stream. We are counting down. We are almost done. The regular season's right around the corner. Some of you are even currently watching preseason football as we wrap up week 2 of the preseason, or week 3 if you count the Hall of Fame. I'm happy to be here tonight with my main man, Kraig, and we are going to talk about everything that we just got done watching or are currently watching. I'm seeing news and notes come across the stream about Travis Etienne, foot injuries, and the world being on fire, but we'll get to all that. First and foremost, hopefully you guys are doing well and you had an amazing weekend. Kraig, how are you, my friend? How is the world treating you up there in Wisconsin?
I'm tired. It was a long but productive day, which is good. But, get exhausted by the end of it. So good day overall. Glad to be on. And, it kind of there's only a few of these left. And with the preseason, we're sort of just going over the last week's news in terms of what happens in the games, but also outside of the games and how all this all lays out. It's sort of like our own little fireside chats where, you're FDR and I don't know, I'm John Nance Gardner, the VP or something, and we're just having a chat with everyone about the world of IDP as it was for the week. So
I like it. 4 score, Bubba. 4 score.
That was a little bit before FDR last time.
I couldn't think of a good FDR quote that I could at least remember. It's been a long Monday for me to try to pull FDR quotes out of the hat, so we'll just go all the way back.
It's a presidential quote anyway.
We'll go back to number, what was he, 16? Was that Abraham Lincoln was 16? So at least I knew that much. It was an interesting weekend. I haven't quite gotten through watching every game. Obviously, I had to cut the Jags game short, the Jacksonville game short, but I have been seeing the news and notes going on there. There was a lot of IDP relevant stuff that happened this weekend. There was some fun IDP relevant stuff and then a lot of negative IDP relevant stuff that happened this weekend. So tonight we're gonna talk that. We're gonna talk about, obviously we're gonna hit the news and notes first and get through all that and maybe just kind of give our thoughts. But if you guys have questions or have, things that you're trying to figure out, post them in the comments. You know that Kraig and I take care of you and we get that all answered. I do want to remind you guys, for anybody who's watching, don't forget, drop a like, a comment, subscribe, all that good stuff that I ask you to do every time you see me on YouTube. Our fearless leader, Rick, is also doing a big Guillotine Leagues giveaway. So make sure you jump into the Discord and take part in that, because that's a cool contest, and you can win some free money out of the deal and have a good time. So make sure you do that, and then let's have some fun. We got a couple weeks left, and just a reminder: once we get to the regular season, we're not competing with Monday Night Football. You guys like the Manning brothers better than you like Kraig and I, so we are going to take the season off, but still have written content. I'm going to go back to doing Tuesday night and Wednesday nights like we did last season. But you can still see Kraig live Tuesday nights as well. He's been helping out Gary, the IDP tipster, and that awesome team with the Gridiron Ratings folks. So make sure you tune in Tuesday nights to him as well. And you can just watch both of us. I think I'm like a half hour earlier, but make sure you check us both out. With that being said, news and notes. Kraig, kick it off. What do we got? What are we talking about?
Yeah, so a lot of this will bleed over, and there's going to be some, back and forth between, probably stuff from games and as it applies to all of this. But something that wasn't directly related to a game, as far as they know, but it maybe was. They just aren't sure. Joseph Osai, who we talked about, the rookie edge player for the Bengals, is out for the year, but it has nothing really to do with the wrist injury. I think it was his right wrist that he had injury in the game. They found that he had a meniscus tear. And he is going to be undergoing surgery, and by all accounts, that's very likely going to keep him out for this year, which is unfortunate. He had been playing very well. He was probably going to be sort of in a backup role behind Hubbard and Hendrickson, but he was certainly, with the pass rushing chops that he had shown, going to have a role. He had played well in their game. They went out and did sign recently cut from the New Orleans Saints, Noah Spence. Spence was a 2016 second rounder who hasn't done a whole lot. He was out all of 2020 where he tore his ACL, I believe, or one of his ACLs, as he has two. Again, as far as we know. But 2016, his rookie year, he had 5.5 sacks, 2 tackles for a loss, and 22 tackles, which isn't a whole lot, and that was his best year. So more of a depth signing. He is better suited to sort of this defensive end role as opposed to the outside linebacker. They're trying to shoehorn him into in New Orleans. So I think this is a better fit, and the depth, behind Hubbard and Hendrickson isn't a whole lot of names that you're going to know. It's a lot of young guys with stuff to prove, which is good. But again, an area that with Osai sort of felt like it might be, an improvement over what they had. The Bengals just keep having bad luck, it seems.
That injury bug always seems to kick them. Like every year, it seems like some critical pieces get injured and just kind of sends everything down a tailspin. In my mind, the name to watch would be a guy who's currently hurt, but it's supposed to be a minor shoulder injury, and that's Cam Sample. He's a guy that they, at least from everything I've read, they were excited about, thought he might be able to develop. If he's healthy, they'll probably wind up giving him some opportunity. There's not a lot to be excited about. Khalid Kareem, Monty Bledsoe, Wyatt Hubert. I mean, these are a lot of names that aren't household guys and just were either college free agents or late round draft picks over the last few years. This would be a team that I would think would be scouring the cut lists to find a replacement, because as we have to drop down to, 80 tomorrow and then 53 next week. So it's very quickly going to see a lot of free agents out on the market. So I wouldn't be surprised if they bring in, situational pass rushers to fill in the void for sure.
And something similar to this, we're going to jump around here a bit because that's what I like to do to keep Brad on his toes. Another just devastating injury, Carl Lawson of the Jets, after we were on last week. Ended up that he tore his Achilles and he's out for the year, which we know is not a good injury to come back from. That's not as bad, I would say, for a defensive end, although, certainly you need that to get that burst as a running back, as we've seen what ends up happening with running backs. But he was supposed to be their top sort of edge rusher, and clearly that won't happen this year. So, they've had another injury that we'll talk about. They've gotten bit by that bug too, but the Jets have openly said, or at least their head coach, that they're interested in, looking for trading for some potential pass rushing depth. And teams are going to prefer to trade someone if they're able to, as opposed to, just picking off the, letting someone go rather. Team would rather trade him to someone else than, cut him and get nothing for him. So certainly an IDP loss from that edge position and defensive line. If you're in those leagues, there's a lot of hopeful people for Carl Lawson this year. So do you have any sort of names, that come to mind with, potential depth where they might be looking to move a guy, or people that are unhappy in a situation that might get moved?
Man, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go with the guy, because I'm keeping you on your toes. I'm going with the guy that I was excited about coming into the draft, wound up not getting drafted, but then went to the Jets, and he's worked hard. Hamilcar Rashed Jr., he won, was he from Tulsa, I think, if I remember correctly, he was a linebacker that they've got him playing edge here. I could be wrong, but I know that he won awards in college last year.
I think it was Ohio, Oregon State. It was something state.
Yeah, he was a Beaver. My bad, not Tulsa. He was at Oregon State. You're right. He's a guy that has looked, I thought looked, again, made me go, why did he not get drafted? I wasn't really sure why, but he's looked good in the limited opportunities that he's been given. So I would expect them to go after him and continue to push him up the depth chart, because when you look at this Jets depth chart, I mean, there's not a lot to be excited about. John Franklin Myers is a guy that could have some value for them. Yeah. They drafted Jabari Zuniga in 2020 in the third round as a guy that isn't brought in by necessarily Robert Saleh, but at least by the GM last year. So there might be some value there. But those are kind of the three guys when I saw the Carl Lawson injury and I looked at what they had still, I was like, well, they could see what they have here. They still have one preseason game to try to figure it out. And if it doesn't make sense, then you can go out on the waiver wire, or you can go out, and try to trade for somebody. But, trying to look at, and that's a tough thing because this Jets team's rebuilding. It's not like they're ready to compete for a championship. So for me, why would they waste something to go get somebody, unless they're spending a 6th or 7th round pick and it's a guy they think could be a long-term investment for them. And it's hard because then you're looking at guys who are, probably 25, 26 and younger. Most teams, if they're good enough, guys aren't getting cut at that age. But, look at, check and see what the 49ers are doing. Robert Saleh knows that team very well. Obviously, he was there.
Yeah.
Do they cut somebody that he could use? That would have been my first guess, is who are teams that these guys have connections to that they could maybe try to bring somebody in. But I like what they got.
Yeah. I like Rashad, too, from what he has shown so far. I think one of the big reasons that it seems like he was just one of those tweeners, and I mean he still is, where size-wise he just doesn't fit anywhere traditionally. Now we know the NFL is moving away from that. People that are creative are going to get use out of guys, but he has great speed and explosiveness. He just has a little bit slower, he's a little bit lower on the size, both height and weight, from what you'd see. I mean, if you're going to compare him and the guy, we're potentially talking about him replacing, Rashad is he's under 6'3", like 250. And Carl Lawson, which I don't have pulled up here.
He was bigger.
Yeah. He's a bigger dude.
He is. Well, he's 6'2", so he's shorter, but he weighs more. He's like 270. So he's
that's a good 25.
Yeah, he's got a significant amount of weight on him.
About the same height. So it'll be interesting. There's room to grow, and sticking on this sort of New York Jets train, something similar with people having things to prove. Jared Davis, who I know you're a big fan of, and I also know Gary, the IDP tipster, is a big fan of, and was worried about another one of his guys a couple of years in a row going down, because he's been all aboard the Jared Davis hype train for months now, back to the spring when he signed. He is going to be out for around 2 months, they said, of prediction wise, through their week 6 bye week, they said, with an ankle injury. That's not quite a high ankle sprain, but something similar. So certainly he avoided the worst case scenario, dislocation or breaking it or something, but he'll be out for a while. And they said that Jamie Sherwood, who I think was a 5th round pick, 5th or 6th round pick out of, was he Duke? I'm all over the place here. But anyway, he was going to be one of them. He was Auburn. Sorry, I don't know why I have Duke on the mind. He is going to be replacing Davis at the moment. They're going to try him, and it's interesting because you got C.J. Mosley pretty much penciled in the middle linebacker for that defense, and now you're going to have what looks like 2 rookies flanking him with Sherwood, and then Hamza and Nasruddin as the other one. We're both guys that we talked about, a few times on the show. We both liked both of them, but more as a long-term play. But it sounds like they're both going to get chances here, in this next preseason game and then into the regular season. Speaking out of the 2 of them, since, mostly we kind of know what we have, are you more excited out of one or the other out of them now that Sherwood's going to get a shot here?
My hope was that Saleh could help Jared Davis in the ways that Detroit just never could when it came to coaching him to slow down and be a little bit more smart with his angles, because he had an insanely athletic profile, but he was always overrunning plays. And, and I had that thought, not to jump to Detroit because I'm going to talk about Derrick Barnes because I love him, but so there was a play Saturday night where Derrick Barnes shot the gap, and I was like, it made me feel like I was watching Jared Davis over again, except Derrick Barnes made the tackle. Like, he just nailed the guy, brought him down, where Jared Davis would have, shouldered him and missed and whiffed. And, Jared Davis just needed to be taught to slow down, take better angles, bring the ball carrier down, not try to overrun things. I think this gives Sherwood an opportunity to really put a stamp on things, because when you look at Sherwood is I don't want to say the opposite of Davis. So Davis is extremely athletic. Sherwood, another safety converted to linebacker, which is surprising to me. How they took all these safeties, converted them to linebackers, and now going to start them. I'm fascinated by it, and I want to see how it plays out for him because I love both these safeties. I loved him at safety, and at linebacker, I'm really just intrigued to see what happens. I think as a linebacker, Sherwood looks like he's going to be fast enough to play in Jared Davis's spot, but not fast enough to be Jared Davis and overrun things. So I'm hoping that if he can be sure in his tackling, take good angles, be able to bounce out into coverage a little bit, and hopefully being a safety, converted to linebacker, he's had plenty of opportunities to do that. I'm intrigued. I think he could take this position in 2 months of good playing time, but it really was up for grabs in the first place because Davis didn't look spectacular so far this preseason. I mean, and what I've seen, I wasn't impressed. I just thought he did okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think Davis, barring something we're not predicting, but Sherwood just, being a house of fire, playing well, not just getting stats for fantasy,
Right.
but actually on the field doing great. Davis is going to get it when he comes back because they want to see what they have in him. And they're going to get a shot at seeing Sherwood early into the rookie contract where Davis is on a 1-year deal, and they're going to figure out, hey, is this someone we think can play next to Mosley? Is it a long-term solution? So I fully expect him to get it back. But to your point about a team that maybe they did have higher hopes than a lot of us do or did for them, but those are quickly feeling dashed here with, that improved defense who wasn't bad last year. They were, I think, average for the most part. When you look at the grading, it feels like they're going to take a step back to me, with these sort of injuries to these guys, but we'll have to see what these backups do.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. And more injuries. Yeah, not at all. Another starter here, likely guy in the middle for the Browns, Jacob Phillips. He's predicted to be out for the year with a biceps tear. Again, he was looking to be the man in the middle for the Browns on a team that does have Super Bowl aspirations. And they're going to have to replace him now. There's been chatter I've seen. Well, JOK, who's played well in the preseason, especially that first game when he was all over the field making plays, with that backup unit. They invested a high draft pick in him. Is that someone that you see that is going to take over? Or do you think they're going to Walker is the guy in the middle.
Right, Anthony Walker.
Phillips, do you see
I don't expect
taking over for him.
To me, that seems like more of a joke than JOK. There's your dad joke. They brought in Walker. He's a veteran. This team has playoff aspirations. I just don't see them putting such a critical position in the hands of a rookie who is very good. Like, he's looked very good so far. I really think that they start with Walker. If I remember correctly, he sat against the Giants over the weekend.
Yeah, he didn't play this week.
Which made me think that they were treating him like he was now becoming the starter, if he wasn't already. I mean, that's the thing is, depending on what you're reading, Phillips and Walker were kind of going back and forth as being kind of the top guy in the middle, but both getting playing time. So I would think that Walker gets a heavy dose where JOK gets sprinkled in and used situational pass rush situations, maybe when they're trying to, contain a guy like Lamar Jackson and you need a lot of speed on the field, things like that. Like, that would be where I would expect them to see JOK bring him in until he's fully ready. When I've watched JOK on the field, you can tell that his athletic profile is exactly what we expected. He's all over the place. I still think he's got some room to grow. There's times where I watch him like, was that really the assignment that he had? But his athletic ability makes up for any deficiencies that he's still trying to learn the system and things like that. So I don't anticipate it being a rookie getting thrown into the fray because this team is ready to compete. I mean, they're stars all over the place. I don't know that they want to trust that to a rookie, but what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's going to start, but I think he's going to get significant playing time because, the other sort of two guys that you look at there, outside of Walker in the middle, you have Mac Wilson, who they're talking about, and then Taki, one of your favorites from a couple of years ago, for name's sake, at least one of your favorites. Neither one of those guys are today's NFL's linebackers, for lack of a better phrase. They're more of the Wilson by far. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just 2-down thumpers who ram down and get the ball carrier, flying blocks. Where JOK, I mean, he's played in the slot already. You know, the first game like 25%. He had played, you know, sort of that. What was that field? Was it does Notre Dame call it the Joker position where they're all over the field? Or they have another name for it?
Yeah, they call it something else.
But that's basically what he had done for them. I mean, he was just all over the field. So he's done that before. He knows these different positions. I think he's going to get on the field a lot, whether he's a starter in name or not.
Right.
You know, maybe not the first game or two, but he showed enough that, hey, you know, the game right now isn't too fast for him. Yes, it'll take a step up from preseason to regular season. But especially if they are competing and, you know, they're getting into some of these higher scoring games, I think they're going to have to use him out there because I don't think they're going to be able to get away with those two in coverage.
Well, and remember, you know, and so this is the conversation I've been having with some folks that, you know, they're trying to take away all these things from what they're seeing in the preseason. I'm like, listen, most of these people they're not game prepping for the team they're facing. They're just trying to put their guys in situations and see how they do. You know, it's like, okay, yes, these rookies and some of these guys have looked really good, but the teams aren't trying to do anything about them. They're just putting their teams out there, running their plays, doing their script, going through their motions. You know, like the game, you know, I was talking to somebody about Lions Steelers, you know, over the weekend. I was like, yeah, starters aren't playing on both sides of the ball. Also, they aren't game scripting for each other. They weren't trying to take anybody out of the game. You know, you always hear about Bill Belichick, how he schemes to take a player out of the game, take your top option out of the game. Teams aren't doing that in the preseason. So I try to temper people's expectations. What you're looking for in the preseason is you're looking to see guys that are picking up the defense or picking up the scheme that they're in, doing their assignments. Do you see the athletic ability? Are they up to speed? If you're a rookie, are they picking up things quickly and being able to move at a fast pace and not looking like their heads on a swivel, like they're trying to figure out where their assignments are? You know, there's so much that goes into just seeing the development. So I try not to worry too much about it, but a guy like JOK has got the athletic ability and can do a lot to wreak havoc on an offense that they have to put him in. It's just going to look a little different. You know, Isaiah Simmons type role where he's kind of used in various positions.
All right. Not a necessarily injury-related thing because it's not necessitated out of that as far as we know, but Everson Griffin is back. Sully, if you're listening, he's back with your Vikings after he was traded to the Cowboys, I think.
And then he went to Detroit.
Yeah, and he went to Detroit, so you had some fun with him. Do you see this? And again, they don't have a whole lot across. You know, we're thinking they're going to have a improved defensive line. You know, with Pierce playing this year and some of the additions that they've made. But is this more of just a depth signing, or do you see him being a starter because of familiarity with the team, with the defense, and just sort of being that veteran and a team that, to me, feels like they haven't given up hope of, hey, we're going to win this division and get to the Super Bowl, where, to me, the parts really, and defense especially, don't show that.
Yeah. I can't see this being anything more than a veteran sign. From a fantasy perspective, this doesn't move the needle in the least. Really what this tells me is that Minnesota had trouble with their depth. They weren't really sure what some of these young guys, because remember, they've drafted like 4 or 5 defensive ends in this draft and last year's draft. What I'm hearing is they need some veteran leadership to help grow these guys. That's what I saw when Everson Griffin came to town. Watching him last year, he still had a little bit. He still was doing some things with Detroit. You know, he made some good choices, but they limited the snap counts. As a guy who watches Detroit very closely, they were putting him on a pitch count every week. He'd only got a certain amount of snaps, and Minnesota's not going to be able to put him out on the field for 75 to 80% of the snaps. He's really, if he was a regular player, in this defense, I mean, if he plays more than 50% of the snaps, you're going to see him slow down. Age has caught up to him a little bit, but he's still got a good swim move. He's still got some good things to put out there that he can help a team. But I think it's Weatherly across from Danielle Hunter, or maybe even like Patrick Jones, who's a very athletic dude. But I'm not excited about Griffin for sure.
Well, just throwing it out there as it's a name that people are going to be familiar with.
It is, yeah. Not IDP relevant for sure, though.
This one, again, not a name that we've brought up much, but linebacker injuries here. Ben Kerwin, looking to be one of the starters for the Seahawks, tore his ACL and will miss this year. Do you think they're going to stay in-house with their current house, that is, with a guy like Cody Barton, or do you think they're going to be maybe knocking on KJ Wright's door again?
Well, so Cody Barton is a guy that they really like, but I don't know that I've seen him do any reps on the outside. I think I've only seen him primarily as the Mike. So, with the scheme that Seattle runs, there's a pretty significant difference in responsibilities. So I would think that they could slide Barton over if they wanted to, because in theory, you want to put your three best linebackers on the field. I know they've at least been remotely pleased with Williams and Radigan, from what I've read. Not guys that and not guys that I'm even remotely interested in getting. This is another one of those where you're probably going to see them watch everybody else's cuts, or maybe, like you said earlier, with some of these other teams, try to trade a late round pick for a linebacker. These guys need some depth, need some help, need some competition. But Barton, I would assume, would be the first man up if anybody. KJ Wright is still free agent. We just, on the top 100, he was like number 63 or something. So certainly a guy that people look very fondly on throughout the league. So I don't know. What are you thinking?
Again, a team that feels like they think that they have a shot to get to the Super Bowl potentially here with that explosive offense, and they have defensive parts. Certainly, there's that extension for Jamal Adams. They still have Bobby Wagner. Yeah. They have some very nice veteran leadership pieces. But,
they got two good players on the defense.
Yeah. I mean, their secondary still is fine. I think their secondary will be fine. Their defensive line has a lot of question marks. Dunlap, I like, but he's getting older. They don't really have anyone established across from him. Their defensive tackles are serviceable. And then, it's Wagner and Jordan Brooks, who we think is going to be good. He should be starting, but still an unknown, for a whole NFL season. And now it looks like a complete unknown next to him. There's going to be some holes here. And it kind of feels like, and I don't know their cap situation or what Wright is looking for, because if he wasn't looking for a ton, he'd probably be signed by now. Is he going to fit? Scheme-wise, sure. But beyond that, we'll have to find out here.
As we talk about Seattle, the name that I'm, just like you mentioned with Jordan Brooks, the name that I want to see what happens with is at the safety position in Marquis Blair. He's a guy that they drafted, I think, in like the second round or something, and everybody kind of expected him to at this point to be the man next to Jamal Adams, but they traded for Quandre Diggs a couple seasons back, and that's kind of slowed Marquis Blair's ascension. Does he ever become fantasy relevant to you?
It's a good question. I mean, it appears not as long as Diggs is going to be there, because I forget the guy's name last year, but even when Adams was out last year, they plugged someone in, and his name was it Neal?
He's not on the roster anymore, I don't think, is he?
I think it was Ryan Neal for some reason, and I think he is still on the team. But he fit in and looked fine. From a fantasy perspective. But that's, I think, that role that they have Jamal Adams play. So if Blair's not starting, no, he's not relevant. And even, Diggs, he has had some use, but part of that comes from his ability to play the cornerback and safety and switch around for him. So.
Okay. That was as we were talking Seattle, and I saw it on the show sheet. I'm like, but Marquis Blair is a guy that, and I think I actually have stashed him on a taxi squad in one league just to see, because it's one that safety, is a position that I needed some help with at that point a couple of years back. So I stashed him waiting to see, but it's coming time for me to have to decide if I'm going to leave him on the taxi squad or dump him. I wrestle with that one. But what else you got? I know we have more linebacker shenanigans afoot in the NFL. So who else are we talking about?
Yeah, this one I was wrong about. You win some, you lose some. Kamal Martin was a guy that I was excited for to get a shot at being one of the guys in the middle for the Packers, and it does not appear that will be happening because they have let him go. Oren Burks, who we had talked about, he's the highest draft pick out of those guys that they're kind of looking at in the middle here. I think he was a former third-round pick by the Packers in 2018, 2017, something like that. He's been around for a while, but just can't stay healthy, but highest draft capital, has a good athletic profile. He's looked good for him, so it would be interesting to see if they're going to have him be that second guy there in the middle next to what feels like Chris Barnes from how they've played and what they've talked about so far. So if we assume that it's going to be Barnes and Burks, are you buying into Burks at all for this year, or do you think that if you're going to own one of these guys with traditionally one of them being, fantasy relevant, certainly startable at times, do you think it's Barnes?
Barnes, I would definitely be at least interested in rostering to see how things go. I don't know that I like Burks as well. I like his athleticism. I like the type of player he fits in that scheme pretty well. But I wonder if the guy they brought in as a free agent from Arizona, Devondre Campbell, doesn't wind up pushing because of the veteran leadership need in the middle there. Barnes is young, Burks is young, Ty Summers is young, another guy that I from what I've read, they at least are remotely liking. It wouldn't surprise me if Campbell is the guy that slides in next to Barnes just because they need a veteran in the middle, because Barnes hasn't really been around all that long. But I would buy into whoever the starter is next to Barnes just to see what you got there, because it could be a position that gives you at least some nice depth value.
And it'll be cheap.
Depending on your league. Yeah, and it's super cheap.
Yeah, I still think Campbell's going to be sort of that edge position depth, especially with it sounding like Zadarius Smith is in danger of missing like week 1 here. Then you're sort of down to maybe Smith and Gary, which is fine. We think, Smith has shown up opposite the other Smith, the injured one. Zadarius Smith is Preston Smith that would be playing with Rashawn Gary, and Gary looked a lot better than he had been. I remember hearing a lot from Packer fans cursing your man from Michigan and how useless and how terrible of a draft pick he was.
I'll say he didn't produce at Michigan, so.
Well, we run into that sometimes. But yeah, I mean, he showed all right last year when he was, sort of that third edge guy. He showed up and got you fantasy points when he was in there for a few games towards the end. So.
Yeah. Last year, as the season finished out, Gary looked strong coming out at the end of the season. So you're absolutely right.
And we got one more of these. Name that wasn't really overly fantasy relevant last year. LJ Fort for the Ravens is out for the year. Torn ACL. Last year, he and Malik Harrison had pretty evenly split snaps on that defense, and it's presumed that probably Harrison is going to be the guy stepping in there to a more consistent role. So my question for you is twofold. You can answer either or both. Do you think Harrison has more fantasy value, or do you think that you're more likely to just invest more in Queen potentially with that, higher workload for him and him being really the guy to be all over the place this year?
I mean, I invested in Queen this offseason anywhere I could, and I know I traded for him, at least in one of our
You traded a handful of peanuts.
Yeah, basically a bag of balls. Malik Harrison, though, is a guy that I like. I think he was a kid didn't he come out of Ohio State, if I remember correctly?
I do believe so.
Yeah,
you said their name.
Well, I'm in Indiana right now, so I don't have to say the team down south, because if I say the team down south, it doesn't make any sense. So, his athleticism. I liked, he's kind of another in the long line of Ohio State linebackers over these last few years that have gotten into the league as a mid-round kind of guy, but hasn't really sprung up and done anything spectacular. So he's a guy I keep an eye on because of the draft capital they invested. I think he was like a 3rd-round pick maybe. It made me think that Baltimore expected him to kind of eventually become the guy next to Queen. And with this Ravens defense, with what they have to face in the North, and what their schedule looks like, Harrison's a guy I'd keep an eye on, but I don't know I don't know if there's a huge amount of fantasy value until we see how this thing plays out. Queen is still the guy I want in the middle of the Ravens defense either way.
Yeah, Queen I liked. I mean, coming out of the draft, my mind is gone. He was my top linebacker after the draft anyway. I don't remember if that's how it was beforehand. I know you were more of a Murray guy at that time.
Yep.
We both like Simmons, which is fine. Queen showed out really well last year. Again, one of these sort of top teams that has a shot, they believe, at the Super Bowl. And I think, they're at least in that conversation for winning the division and potentially coming out of the AFC. Queen's going to have to be the guy there. And if something were to happen to him, that linebacking core would be in loads of trouble. So,
yeah.
Harrison in deeper leagues, he'll have more value for you, but he's probably not someone you're going to want to be starting either way.
Well, and, the issue with Harrison, if I recall, is, he's more of a I don't want to say the throwback linebacker like we talked about with some of those other guys because he's a little bit faster, but he's not going to give you a lot of interceptions. Like his hands are not really that good at picking off passes. From everything I've seen, he's more of a very physical guy, can take on blockers and get off blockers, get in the backfield. So he's more of a potentially tackle heavy type linebacker than making any other types of big plays where Queen can do it all. So, that was kind of my concern when looking at those two, in this defense period.
All right. So that is most of the signings, injury news, all that sort of stuff, which, definitely plays into what happens in the games here next week and going forward. And if you want to, why don't you go ahead and start with your guy we'll see if we talk about him for the third week in a row next week before we end. But Derrick Barnes, who saw some more playing time, and I'm just guessing by the box score alone, you were very excited about.
Yeah. I mean, I would have loved to see an interception on that box score because Mason Rudolph basically hand delivered him a pass over the middle, and I think he got a little excited because those hands got a little excited. He blocked it for sure. That ball hit the ground, but it could have been in his hands and could have stayed there. I was having a conversation with some folks on the in the Detroit area that I talked to that do some some reporting for the team, and and I said, how is Derrick Barnes not running with the ones? With what's ahead of him. I mean, Tavai has been brutal. Alex Anzalone is okay, but he's not Derrick Barnes. I mean, this is a team that it's not like this team has playoff aspirations where they need to trust the middle of this linebacking group to a veteran because they're trying to help lead it. Barnes had the green dot on the helmet Saturday night, and I thought he did a great job. I saw plenty of times where he was helping guys, not just calling the play, but helping move the defense around. This kid is smart. He's physical. He's got good instincts. He jumped, the almost interception. He watched the quarterback jump the route, nearly grabbed the ball. He's a guy that in fantasy, I'm very excited about the prospects of, when you look at, when you want to try to compare him to something that you've seen, if you look at what the Saints were with Aaron Glenn involved in that defense, think of a DeMario Davis type player in the defense. I know that doesn't get anybody super excited, but he has that kind of role where he's going to do a lot in the middle and be able to get you some good fantasy value because Davis had some times where he had some fantasy value. Barnes is more athletic. He's a better tackler, more sure tackler, at least at this point as a rookie, and he's a guy that I've tried to acquire that nobody's really trading. I know I drafted him in our IDP guys invitational. I went young with linebackers in that invitational. I think I grabbed like Jordan Brooks and Barnes and Bobby Okereke. I'm really, people are probably surprised at whatever I'm doing with this draft, but I like him. I think Barnes is a guy that can really step up and take the reins. And, I think he's got good fantasy potential because Detroit needs it. They don't really have any good linebackers. Jamie Collins is old. Alex Anzalone was a free agent for a reason. Outside of that, Jalen Reeves-Maben is a special team ace. That's really his role. And we don't have much else.
Yeah. So, he didn't play a whole lot. It looks like he was with the second group of linebackers. They had Tavai and Reeves-Maben as the two starters with Collins and Anzalone both not playing.
Right.
The other guy that I had read anything positive about was Pittman. Do you see anything him sort of long term? Or is he looking more backup?
He'll be a backup for now. I mean, with this defense, because of their lack of good linebackers, he could develop. I mean, he's more athletic than Anzalone. I just didn't see enough out of him when watching him. There was a few times that he looked good. He definitely got involved in that defense and made some tackles, but it wasn't like anything that was eye-popping. He just wasn't terrible like some of the other linebackers. So I guess if you're not terrible, then you're fine.
That is a low standard to meet, but hey, sometimes that's all you need.
When you're rebuilding, this unfortunately happens. But
anything you saw out of the other side of that game since we were on it when Pittsburgh and Killebrew had another good game, but
he's a backup. They're not starting him. I don't think I saw him until the second half, if I remember correctly. I don't think I saw him until
still.
I think he could be a depth guy. I mean, he was a depth guy in Detroit for most of his career thus far. I mean, with what they're asking him to do, he played a lot more closer to the line as almost a hybrid linebacker role. So he's a thumper, good tackler, a plus athlete. I wouldn't surprise me with what their team looks like. For me, I liked a guy we mentioned a little bit, Isaiah Buggs. I think his name's Isaiah Buggs. I know his last name's Buggs. I saw him a few times in some of the times that because I've rewatched that game, I don't know, like 2 or 3 times, because I'm
Lions fan.
Because I hate my time. I hate my free time. And Buggs is a guy that I saw a couple times make some plays. And I'm like, okay, I see you. Looks good. And then another one is the undrafted kid out of Notre Dame, Jones.
Jamir?
Yeah, Jamir Jones. He's a guy that it looks like they really actually will get him involved as a pass rusher off the edge. Remember, they're still trying to fill the Bud Dupree role. This kid's got some juice to his game that I would keep an eye on him, because he did a good job. I mean, obviously going against Detroit's backups from the start, it's not hard to look good, but he's got, good bend, good dip, getting around the edge. I mean, I was excited when I saw him. I was like, this kid, I mean, I know they brought in Melvin Ingram, but maybe Melvin Ingram's helping some of these young guys like Jones kind of take that next step. And so he's a name that I would keep an eye on for sure. Him and Buggs were 2 that I was like, okay, I see you both. Roche didn't get a ton of he got involved, but it wasn't, there was nothing that he did really like, there we go. He looked okay, which is weird because week 1 he looked really good.
Yeah, you're going to see a lot of that, though, week to week, the
young guys especially.
And it's more the young guys that probably have higher draft capital and also, are showing the ability to do at least one thing really well. We're not going to go into him again because it's sort of the same information from the prior week, but Gregory Rousseau, the guy has speed, the guy can get around and get to the quarterback. He's going to have a role in Buffalo. And is he likely to start? The way McDermott runs things? No, I don't think so. But on a team that a lot of people do have picked to make it to the AFC title game at the least, he's a young guy that's going to have a role. And depending on your league, you might be able to get him later in a draft. So defensive lineman who is not a rookie, in a different game that we had this week, the Chicago Bears took on Buffalo, since we were talking about Buffalo. And the Chicago Bears overall did not show a whole lot on offense, but we're not here to talk about offense. We're here to talk about defense. And when a team puts up 41 points against you, you're going to have a lot of snaps to be on the field and show something. One guy that stood out to me that had formerly been a very highly recruited guy out of college or into college, and then he didn't do a whole lot, but he was a second rounder for whatever that's worth anymore in 2015. Mario Edwards Jr. He had himself a game, and I know he's been a depth guy, that he had health issues and he just never completely put it together. But this is a Bears defense that lost some pieces, and their defensive line specifically could use some help. In this game, he had 3 solos, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for a loss, 2 other QB hits. Is this someone that you see potentially could have a role, and then, fantasy relevance, probably more in those interior lineman leagues where those guys are sort of grouped in the 3-4 defense? the defensive linemen with defensive tackles. Is that something you could see him maybe showing up on, or is he probably going to be a depth guy for the Bears yet?
When you look at the Bears on paper, this defensive line looks like Akeem Hicks and a bunch of yuck. I mean, like nothing that's super exciting. So, yeah, I mean, Edwards, if he continues to look like what we saw this week against Buffalo, he should have no problem because, what's he competing with? Bilal Nichols, Angelo Blackson, Daniel Archibong, LaCale London. I mean, who? Whole bunch of what?
Yeah, I mean, right. Goldman's nice, but he's a nose tackle, and it's pretty much him, Hicks, and who like a toss up here, and that's kind of why I mentioned him, because we've seen guys, and I'm not saying he's either of these guys, but Tuitt and Hayward, from that sort of defensive end position, a similar defense, have a lot of relevance guys that you can start, especially if it's going to be an interior lineman league, and Edwards had all the talent in the world. He was a high draft pick. He did great in college. He had those injuries and just never put it together. I think it was with the Raiders, essentially. So,
you heard it here first, people. Kraig just compared Mario Edwards Jr. to Stephon Tuitt.
That's right.
No, I think you're right. I think if anybody has a chance, it's him because the draft pedigree, like you said, highly recruited, highly touted. I mean, why not? If he's healthy and he's got everything together and he's coming in and working hard. I mean, he's a veteran, so he doesn't have as much tread on the tires because of injuries and all the other stuff. So, I mean, why not?
And I mean, Tuitt was a second-round pick. Edwards was a second-round pick. It was a year or two off. I mean, exact same person.
They both play football. I mean, it's crazy.
In the NFL on defense, what more could you ask for here?
Detroit just signed a guy who's in the AAF as their long snapper, so anything's possible.
Yeah, you're with the longest tenured long snapper in the league. You got rid of.
We fired him on his birthday.
Did your coach go bite his kneecap on the way out too?
You know what? But my coach owned it. They actually played together. Like when Campbell was in Detroit in 08 and 09, I think they were on the team together. And Campbell was like, "I'm an a-hole. I accept that. It is what it is." I mean, like when he did the interview, the press conference after all of it, they're showing pictures of the guy with a big giant 40 next to his locker because he's 40 years old and this, that, and the other. Then he gets fired on his birthday. It was comical. I felt bad for Muehlbach because guy started like every game and long snapper, his entire career with us, and then they fire him on his birthday. And then hire a guy who was with Dallas, with Chicago, with the AAF, with the XFL. Like, that guy's been in every league imaginable, except for the CFL. But he's
got time.
He's got a job now. He's an NFL player. He doesn't have to. He's just like Stephon Tuitt. He's an NFL player.
Just wait till his birthday, and then I'm sure he'll get fired too, since that's what your coach likes to do. The long snappers.
Is that the MO? Long snappers.
It is right now. Out of the one long snapper that he's fired as a head coach.
That's a weird statistic. You're 100% fire rate on people's birthdays. Jerk off. So what about your Cowboys? How much did you watch of the Dallas game? What'd you see? What'd you think?
My biggest takeaway is Micah Parsons. They aren't going to be able to keep him off the field. He's just
he's disgusting.
He's everything that I feel he's shown everything that you could possibly want from a rookie. Yeah, it's just the preseason, but there's a reason that there was talks of him being a top 5, top 10 pick, and I know he just fell outside of that. Based on talent alone, I think there's going to be teams in what looks to be a good draft class anyway that are going to regret passing on him.
I know. As much as I love Penei Sewell, watching Hard Knocks and seeing him pissed every time they take him off the field, I'm like, I kind of really wish we drafted this guy instead, because this guy's like wanting to fight somebody because he's not playing in a preseason game.
You could have him and Derrick Barnes, and you would just be, set for your life.
I'm about to say 10 years easily of just high-quality domination.
I was also really impressed by, again, Jibril Cox, and he's a guy that I'm not going to keep repeating, but he fits in today's NFL. And he's not going to be a guy that they're going to be starting out there this year. But if you want to talk about a rookie depth linebacker, I think he looks really nice that could step in and play in a pinch. Neal is getting a lot more playing time, with the starting group and being on the field with them that I had thought. It really does seem like Dan Quinn has committed to this whole Keanu Neal, you're going to be a linebacker, and we're going to see how this plays out. And their secondary is better than I thought it would be. I don't see a whole lot of fantasy relevance outside of probably Donovan Wilson, who should be the starting strong safety. Hooker, maybe if you're in a deep league, because I think there's a really good shot he ends up being the starting free safety. Again, another guy with all the talent in the world that has had injuries, just sort of bounced around, not been able to put it together. I think their defense could be surprising, but they really do need to find just someone else, whether it's Gregory or what they're going to end up doing across from Lawrence, because that defensive line is going to be the biggest problem for him.
Well, and what about the Darian Thompson? I know he had an interception in the last game, and when I rewatched the film, obviously he wasn't going against the most high quality talent, but he at least looked pretty good. I mean, when that free safety position, you have three appears to be talented guys going for it, Hooker, Thompson, and then Kazee, another guy from Atlanta. I mean, what do you think about those other two outside of Hooker? Is it any man's game, or do you think it's just the talent's going to outweigh it?
No, I think it's any man's game. I mean, if you think that Quinn is tied to any of them, it would be Kazee, who I don't think, by any means is a shoo-in for this. Thompson is a guy that they've had there for a few years. His best year came when he was a starter for the Giants, which, he still just didn't do anything amazing. I feel like long-term, he's just a depth piece. Could he start for him? Yeah, but he just doesn't bring anything exciting, where at least Hooker, has shown flashes in the NFL of sort of that big playability that he had at Ohio State. So
figured I'd ask. I remember seeing Thompson pick off somebody. I was like, oh, maybe.
I want to jump back here, and I didn't put him on the list. My segue from Chicago there ended, but guy that we both liked, Boogie Basham, had himself a game against the Bears. Now the Bears' starting offensive line is a mess, so you can imagine what their second string, which is probably now more so their starting unit, but the farther you go down the list, the worse it probably gets. But Basham had 5 solos, an assist, a sack, a couple tackles for a loss, a couple QB hits. There really isn't a whole lot more to say to this. We've talked about it with Rousseau. I think it's just going to be better in real life for him for the first probably couple of years than fantasy-wise, because it feels like there's just going to be a rotation of guys that are sent out there, and depending on the play, to either just pin their ears back and get to the quarterback, or, this group is out there, got some pass rush ability, more out there to block or go against the run blocking rather. But how do you feel about Basham? Do you see someone that you've been able to get any shares of this year? Or we shouldn't say shares. Is he on any of your rosters, or,
I'm not going to share him with anybody. No, I would prefer full 100% ownership.
We can't trade weeks. Is that what you're saying?
No, we're not gonna do some best ball IDP. I don't own any, and it's not for lack of trying. I think he's at least right now, he's probably a guy that they rotate in, especially, a lot of the teams nowadays, yes, they have 4 starters, but they rotate defensive linemen so regularly, especially on the edge, to keep them fresh and to have situational pass rush guys come in. Like Basham, I expect to see get a fair amount of snaps throughout the season, just because what we've seen in the preseason has been everything we thought we'd see. He's, just electric. And I think if you're an IDP owner, I think you want to roster him, but do not roster him with the expectation that 2021 you're going to get consistent weekly production out of him. This is one of those where, and I made the best ball joke, but he would be a perfect best ball player this year, and then probably next year he becomes a regular starter. This year I would not expect there to be I don't think he can be a weekly guy for you. As much as I like him and as much as I think he should be, I would expect AJ Epinesa probably gets in there regularly too. They've got so many defensive ends and so many talented guys on this roster, veterans and young guys. So it would be hard for me to see it, as much as I like Basham, as good as he's done. What do you think?
Yeah, it's just going to be a complete rotational mess, I think, for this year, which is fine. A lot of these guys, I think it serves them better to learn for at least part of a year, not get thrown into the fire necessarily right away. From a fantasy perspective, we spend so much time on rookies, getting excited about them. Oh my gosh, if they go to this team, and sometimes guys do go to a position where they have that potential if they stay healthy, like your boy Pay from Michigan. If he's healthy and he's starting, he's got a great shot to have fantasy relevance this year with that defensive line that he's going to be working with alongside that defense as a whole. Most people don't run into that. And, Basham, as much as I like him, I agree. You're going to need to wait a year or two. But if he turns out and then Rousseau turns out to be half of what the big fans of him think he could be, with a team with, that sort of an offense with Josh Allen that can be explosive and McDermott who knows how to build a defense clearly and go out and find pieces like a Jordan Poyer that he pulled off the scrap heap from the Browns and turned into one of the best safeties in the NFL, and then Hyde. I mean, he knows how to build that defense, and that offense they have figured out, man. I'd like to, both Basham and Rousseau, if they can learn from these guys like Hughes and Addison's the other one,
right? And
like you said, Epinesa is there. They get a chance to be really nasty for a long time. Those two next to each other,
absolutely do. And we never know what's going to happen. Just like, obviously everybody's been seeing the news that Colts are expecting both their big offensive pieces that are injured to be back. Like anything's possible. Injuries spring up all the time. Teams, I tell, don't overthink it. Don't worry about it. If you love the talent of a player, find a way to put him on your roster. If you think the guy's going to become something special, and Basham, Rousseau, these are guys that you want to roster, because they're going to be long-term assets that are going to be helpful for your team because they both are talented and they fit this scheme well, and they do the things that even in just 2 preseason games, you've seen enough out of both of them to go, okay, they fit exactly what they could be, and now it's just a waiting game to see when they get their time to shine. They're like Brucey. They just need their time to shine.
Couple other things here to hit quick. One of them is a name we've thrown around before, just in fantasy in general. Christian Kirksey. He played the first 4 drives with Cunningham. And the last game they played against Dallas here, for what it's worth in the preseason. We know it gets thrown around a bit depending on who's playing, but he had the green dot. Do you think Kirksey ends up having some sort of relevance with how much that defense is probably going to end up being on the field?
As long as he's healthy. Kirksey's issue has always been injuries, from what I remember. I stopped rostering him I stopped rostering him when he couldn't stay healthy. But he's got the talent to be valuable, and with this team being on the field as much as they are, he probably will. Him and Cunningham, I could easily see them both get around 100 tackles, and Cunningham I expect more than 100 tackles. So yes, I don't know that I would trust him as a weekly starter, but he'd definitely be a guy I'd be comfortable with rostering, and with the hopes that you got him for cheap, and maybe he can return you some value, on a fairly regular basis.
And then the last one, a guy that we have not talked about before, to the best of my recollection. He has caught his coach's eye, and it sounds like, the Vic Fangio, we're going to be talking about the Broncos here, basically came out and said that he's going to be making the team, which is interesting. Things can change, certainly. But Jonathan Cooper, who was the 7th round pick this year out of and I never say that, but just because you're here, I'll say it, Ohio State University.
This kid, I'll tell you.
I just think it's hilarious that they still say "the" in front of it, because literally every college can do that. But regardless, he had a really good game this past week. He had, for the limited time that he was in, 2 solos and assists, 2 sacks, forced fumble, pass deflection. Looking like he's going to be the number 4 pass rusher behind Chubb, Miller, and then Reed, which isn't anything huge, but for a 7th round rookie to be making that impact on a veteran defensive coordinator who believes in him and says, yes, he'll be involved in special teams, we think, but he keeps getting better and improving. We know Miller's maybe in his last stint here. Chubb's coming back from injury. Do you think that there's anything here long-term worth the stash, or is it more just someone that's doing well and caught his coach's eye and probably not going to be anything?
No, I think it's stash worthy. Obviously, 7th round draft capital, doesn't excite anybody. But when you look at what they want him to do, which is just be a pass rusher, I think that adds some value to the situation, knowing that Von Miller, like I said, Miller's not there for long. Bradley Chubb has some injury history, so he could easily be a guy that you stash now, and you could see him playing regularly throughout the season. If a guy gets hurt, ineffective, they want to rotate in and out. I wouldn't be upset taking a chance and a flyer on him. I know we didn't talk about him, but it was mostly because this was a solid linebacker group, and he was not one of the top, probably not one of the top 10 to 20 guys on our list to even really talk about throughout the draft season.
Yeah.
But he is a good pass rusher. He is an Ohio guy. And he does a good job getting to the quarterback, and he's got the athletic profile and all the things you want to see. So take a shot on him. I mean, he's going to be free. Nobody's got him right now. I mean, he's not rostered very much anywhere. So never hurts to have him on your roster and see what happens. If not, he's back into your roster churning kind of fodder as the season goes on. If you need to drop a guy for your weekly cornerback pickup, if you're like me, then you rotate corners in on the weekly basis just about.
That's all right. Time for tonight. Yeah, we could go on into more and more. There's always more that we could dig into, but you can find us and ask us questions if you have any.
You can Google us.
Well, I don't know that I would. One of the rules is don't Google yourself. Don't Google your heroes. Not that we're your heroes either, but or maybe we are. Brad certainly is.
We may not be the heroes you wanted, but we're the heroes you get. Is that what it is? We're Batman.
We're not the ones you need or deserve. Quite frankly, you deserve better. But we're here for you.
Listen. Tuesday nights throughout the season, you get the heroes you deserve on Kraig and Gary's IDP show. All right, so you can watch them throughout the season and get the heroes you deserve. There is always a lot more to talk about. We thank you guys for hanging out with us as always. It's always a fun time talking defense. Thank you guys for comments on the shows after the fact. I was responding to comments the other day. Somebody was pleasantly surprised that we were able to talk about just defensive special teams for redraft for an hour. Listen, when you love defense, you can talk about anything. We can make it all work. So just a reminder for those that have stuck around with us this long, season's coming, things are changing. We've got a lot of DFS content. We've got some great surprise stuff coming, news and whatnots that are going to be happening. So make sure you guys like, subscribe, hit the notification icon, do all those things that tells YouTube and all the internets that you love us. And you get us for 2 more Mondays before we cut it for the season. So we will be back next Monday to recap week 3. And then the Monday after that, we're going to get you ready for the Thursday night game, which would be, week 1 of the regular season. So we do appreciate you guys hanging out with us all off season. It's been a blast. We love talking defense. We love talking about the rookies and the IDPs and all the things that make up the fun side of football. The heroes we degenerate with. Yes, Jaws, we degenerate with you. We love you guys. Thank you for hanging out with us. As always, if you see this video after the fact and you need some help, comment, find us over on Twitter, join our Discord, do all the things. You can talk to us anywhere. We love you guys. We'll talk to you later. See you.
Also, right there, playlist. Hit it. Watch the videos. Do it.